So I'm going to introduce a MATLAB feature called a structure. And so a structure is initialized using the struct function. So for example, I might create a variable s which is initialized to be an empty structure. And then I can set some fields inside s. So I might set a field A, a field B, and a field C, as so. And so now each of these I can pull out individually with a dot, like so. And I can also set new fields, perhaps of differing types, like so. And so what is happening here is that there is a single variable, which is this object s, which contains multiple named fields inside it. And so the field names here in this case are A, B, C, and text. And so there's actually a field names function which gives back the names of all of the fields which are in the structure. And I can also test if something is a field by doing something like this. So A is a field, but ASDF is not a field inside my structure S. So those are the basics of structures in MATLAB, and so the main use of structures is when you want to group multiple things together into one variable. Here's our int power law function from earlier on, and what I'm going to do is show you how you could modify this function to use structures rather than separate arguments to get its data. So what I'm going to show you is how we might go about using this new function. What I've done is just rename these things by putting a 2 at the end here to show that this is the second version that we're writing of these set of functions. So we might want to put everything in a structure, let's call it config. And so let's say we want to use it like this. Instead of having a vector for the x limits, I might say xmin and xmax as separate fields this time around, and then I might call my function something like this. So this is the kind of interface that I want my function to have now. So let's go and modify this one to behave like that. So it's going to need to receive only one argument, which will be our config structure, and then when we use it, we're going to have, we'll just go through and replace the things that were previously arguments with elements of our config structure. So we've got config.xmin, config.xmax, config.a appears there, and config.b. And so notice here that the entire config structure is highlighted in this blue color, which means that it's shared between multiple things here. So that little pop-up was this, that the scope of the variable spans multiple functions. So with that one set up like that, I can run it over here and we get the same result as before. Now this is not necessarily any better. Like this, if there's only 4 arguments, then there's really no problem in you just having those 4 values as separate arguments. But if you had many arguments, let's say you had 20 or 30 of them, then this would be a far superior way of you passing that data in, that you would put all of those 20 or 30 arguments into a structure and then just pass a single structure. So that would be much neater code. If you were if you had a function that required that many inputs, then that would be how you should do it. So the one final thing which I want to show you is a structure array. And a structure array is basically when you have multiple identical structures all grouped together into a single object. So the example that I've got here, this is a little bit of data for the first 4 planets in the solar system. And so I've created an empty structure at the top here, and then I use this syntax, so the name of the structure and then in brackets and a number, and then set the various fields. So I've got here the name of the planet, the distance from the Sun relative to the Earth's distance, and the mass of that planet relative to the Earth's. So if I run that, then what I get is a structure array, a 1x4 structure array, which has these fields inside it. So I can do things like planets 1, which pulls out just the information for the first one. I can do planets 2 and 3 and so on to pull out information for each of those respective planets. But I can also do planets.name like this. And what this will do is print out each of the names for the planets in my structure. So I can do planets.mass, for example, and get each of the masses that are in my structure array. So the way that I would pull these out if I wanted to assign them to values would be syntax like this: planets.mass. So then I would get M1 and M2 to have the values which I expected. So let's just look at that again. So I have square brackets here. The number of items, the number of variables here is the number of planets which I have in my planet structure array. And so what I'm doing is, this is quite short syntax for pulling out the masses of each of my 4 planets or each of my 4 items in that array. So that's how you can use structure arrays if you want to group together many items which have the same set of fields.